In a follow-up to a video that we did earlier today, Trump-supporting news anchors on Fox News and CNBC are visibly dying inside on TV as they react to the news that Trump intends to slap Mexico, Canada, and China with staggering tariffs, which will have an inflationary impact and devastate the American economy. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, this is a bit of fun as we contemplate potential economic disaster, but it's interesting to see people who are aligned with Donald Trump from right-wing media, like Maria Bartiromo of Fox News or Joe Kernin of CNBC Squawk Box, people who not just are right-wing and not just Trump-supporting, but are Trump-supporting in the sense that, they believe that Trump is really good for the economy. Trump and the Republicans are masterful stewards of the economy, and these two in particular focus on financial and economic related issues. And so I want to play some of these clips where they react with visible nervousness and palpable fear about these proposed tariffs, even as they try to hide it. And we'll start with Maria Bartiromo of the Fox Propaganda Network.
Welcome back. The story of the morning, tariffs. President-elect Trump says he will put tariffs on China, Mexico, and Canada until they stop the flow of deadly fentanyl and illegal migrants into America. Trump is promising a 25% tariff on all Canadian and Mexican goods coming into the United States. Trump is also vowing to slap China with a 10% tariff above any additional tariffs already in place. Trump says China never followed through on its promise to crack down on fentanyl and give drug dealers the death penalty. Joining me now is Missouri Congressman Eric Burleson. He is a member of the House Oversight, Transportation, Infrastructure, and Education Committees. Congressman, President Trump promised tariffs, and this is how he's starting. Even before getting into office, your reaction?
Yeah, I think he called tariffs a beautiful word, Maria.
Yeah, he did.
But look, I think it's...
He sure did. Again, you just see, I look at her face just like, oh my God, I'm supposed to be 100% supportive of this man, but I just can't. I'm dying. It's that gif where it's like laughs nervously or screaming internally. That's Maria Bartiromo right there on live TV. I don't have much by way of sympathy because she helped launder and sanitize Trump's reputation as this great mastermind of economic stewardship. So you reap what you sow. Of course, the problem is that everyone will be reaping what she sowed as a consequence of her propaganda, because if Trump follows through on this, which again, Trump's a pathological liar and easily distracted, perhaps he won't, but this would be devastating. And as I discussed in a previous video, the markets are already reacting with volatility, and Trump won't be inaugurated until January 20th. So, we're a ways away from that, about 2 months. And yet already the market's reacting to merely the threat of these staggering tariffs. And so again, not much sympathy for Maria Bartiromo there as she processes the stage of grief, or all stages of grief, in real time. But it's not just Maria, and it's not just Fox. It's also Joe Kernin of CNBC's Squawk Box. Now, I've talked about Kernin nearly as much as I've talked about Bartiromo in previous videos. He's a very rabid, passionate, curmudgeonly defender of Donald Trump. But as the election drew nearer and people like Mark Cuban were on CNBC Squawk Box confronting Kernin about the proposed tariffs from Donald Trump, Kernin was faltering because Kernin isn't stupid. He knows that tariffs are a bad idea, or at least the sort of widespread staggering tariffs on all imported goods from Mexico, Canada, and China that Trump is proposing. And so during a conversation earlier today with former Republican Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, again, a visibly nervous Joe Kernin was seeking some reassurance from Kevin McCarthy. Like, don't a lot of things like really have to go like unusually, extremely, like cosmically, unprecedentedly good for these tariffs not to totally destroy the economy, Kevin? Right, Kevin?
You think that with all these different cross currents that were, tariffs were announced, or on day one, he's going to try and do some of these things.
Yeah, but did you read what he announced and why? I think this is very important.
Yeah, with immigration and fentanyl. And
immigration and fentanyl.
I got it.
So what are you saying? It's
but with all these, I'm just wondering, and with, and Scott Bessent said he's going to get the tax cuts extended and do the no tax on tips, do all those things. Don't a lot of things have to go right for us not to reignite inflation and scare the bond market. Wouldn't you? I'm surprised the bond market it's very strange. The 10-year yield keeps going down because it's supposed to be at 5% by now from fear of Trump.
No, think of this.
You think
so? Yeah. You just see like Kernin visibly fidgeting. His voice is breaking. He's fidgeting in his seats because he is so uncomfortable, and he should be, at Trump's proposal. And he's looking for reassurance in much the same way Bartiromo was with Eric Burlinson. He's seeking reassurance from a former Republican congressperson, but I'm not sure these sort of assurances can be provided. Now, again, for context, I want to remind people, there's a Associated Press article discussing this about what these tariffs could mean in terms of direct, visible, palpable, material pains for the American people, including, of course, people who voted for Donald Trump. Economists say that companies would have little choice but to pass along the added costs, dramatically raising food price. Excuse me. Let's try that again. If Trump makes good on his threat to slap 25% tariffs on everything imported from Mexico and Canada, the price increases that could follow will collide with his campaign promise to give American families a break from inflation. Economists say companies would have little choice but to pass along the added costs, dramatically raising prices for food, clothing, automobiles, booze, and other goods. Trump floated the tariff idea, including an additional 10% taxes on goods from China, as a way to force the countries to halt the flow of illegal immigrants and drugs into the United States. But his post Monday on Truth Social threatening tariffs on his first day in office could just be a negotiating ploy to get the countries to change behavior. High food prices were a major issue in voters picking Trump over Vice President Harris, but tariffs almost certainly would push those costs up even further. For instance, the Produce Distributors Association, a Washington trade group, said Tuesday that tariffs will raise prices for fresh fruit and vegetables and hurt U.S. farmers when other countries retaliate. And again, as a reminder, Mexico has already publicly indicated that if Trump follows through on this, they too shall retaliate with tariffs designed to hurt America. So this would start a trade war. Quote, tariffs distort the marketplace and will raise prices along the supply chain, resulting in the consumer paying more at the checkout line, said Alan Seiger, association president. Mexico and Canada are two of the biggest exporters of fresh fruit and vegetables into the United States. In 2022, Mexico supplied 51% of fresh fruit and 69% of fresh vegetables imported by value into the United States, while Canada supplied 2% of fresh fruit and 20% of fresh vegetables. Before the elections, about 7 in 10 voters said they were very concerned about the cost of food, according to the Associated Press's VoteCast, a survey of more than 120,000 voters. Quote, we'll get them down, Trump told shoppers during a September visit to a Pennsylvania grocery store. The U.S. is the largest importer of goods in the world, with Mexico, China, and Canada its top 3 suppliers, according to the most recent U.S. Census data. People to look and buy a new vehicle would likely see big price increases as well at a time when costs have gone up so much that they're out of reach for many. The average price of a new vehicle now runs around $48,000. About 15% of the 15.6 million new vehicles sold in the United States last year came from Mexico, while 8% crossed the border from Canada, according to global data. As a matter of fact, again, we discussed this in a previous video, but many U.S. automobile manufacturers that are owned, again, by U.S. interests actually have plants in Mexico. So a lot of assets in Mexico that could also be affected by this as well. Much of the tariffs will get passed along to consumers unless automakers can somehow quickly find productivity improvements to offset them, said C.J. Finn, U.S. automotive sector leader for PwC, a consulting firm. That means even more consumers, quote, would potentially get priced out, Finn said. Hardest hit, as we mentioned in a previous video, would be Volkswagen, Stellantis, General Motors, and Ford. Those two were not mentioned in the previous video, but I suppose I shouldn't be surprised. Bernstein analyst Daniel Rosca wrote Tuesday in a note to investors, quote, a 25% tariff on Mexico and Canada would severely cripple the U.S. auto industry, he said. The tariffs would hurt U.S. industrial production so much that, quote, we expect this is unlikely to happen in practice, Rosca said. A tariff threat hit auto stocks on Tuesday, particularly shares of GM, which imports about 30% of the vehicles it sells in the United States from Canada and Mexico, and Stellantis, which imports about 40% from the two countries. For both companies, about 55% of their lucrative pickup trucks come from Mexico and Canada. GM shares were down more than 8%, and Stellantis was off over 5%. It's not clear how long the tariffs would last if implemented, but they could force auto executives to move production to the U.S., which could create more jobs in the long run. But Morningstar analyst David Whiston said in the short term, automakers probably won't make any moves because they can't quickly change where they build vehicles. Millions of dollars worth of auto parts flew across the borders with Mexico and Canada, and that could raise prices for already costly automobile repairs, Finn said. And it goes on and on and on like this. The bottom line is there's a reason that even conservative macroeconomists who wanted Trump to win were pulling their hair out when he proposed widespread, staggering tariffs during the campaign. And now he's assigning a specific value to them with specific countries, 25% on Mexico and Canada, and 10% in additional tariffs to China. Again, potentially triggering trade wars, 3 of them, with our top 3 suppliers at the same time. That's brutal. But I also want to use this as an opportunity to contrast the record of the Biden administration, because speaking of CNBC, which is where Joe Kernin works, they also did an interview with an economics and jobs manufacturing expert who talked about President Biden's CHIPS and Science Act, which was signed into law by the president. It was bipartisan, but President Biden signed it into law, and it has already helped trigger a manufacturing boom in this country.
If the question is, will the CHIPS Act have spurred a major investment boom in chip manufacturing in the United States? The answer is already pretty clear. It's yes. There's been something like a 10x increase over the past couple of years in investment in chip fabs relative to the trend over the prior decade. TSMC, for example, already has a plant up and running in Arizona with the manufacturing quality, the company says, matching what it can do in Taiwan. And we've got big projects underway with other companies as well. I think, you can't see with a crystal ball any specific.
So that's awesome. 10x. Semiconductor manufacturing, by the way, is massive because it's one of perhaps arguably the single most important technological component in most high-tech industries. So we need them for automobiles, we need them for the military, and we need them for health issues and like medical devices as well. And Taiwan is one of, if not the biggest manufacturer of them so far. And TSMC is the Taiwan semiconductor chip manufacturing company, and they're making major investments here in the United States. So it's also related to national security. So developments made under the Biden administration by Democrats, by President Biden, will contribute not only to an increase and a sense of security with regards to national security, but also a really important boom in an extremely important high-tech sector of industry. And that's because of the Biden administration. And again, red states and Donald Trump will be able to benefit from this, especially as these things continue to mature while Trump is president. And he's going to try to take the credit for it, as I mentioned in another previous video, that these things that were brought into effect by the Biden administration and by their stewardship, Republicans, they're already trying to take credit for things that the Biden administration has successfully done, despite the fact that in many cases, they not only voted against the bill, they actually lobbied others to oppose the bill as well. Now they're trying to take credit for it. Imagine what's going to happen as these incredibly important manufacturing centers and factories are built, again, because of legislation Trump had nothing to do with. He's going to try to take credit for it. And it's incumbent on the rest of us to correct the record so that Republicans, not only because it's just not true, but also so Republicans don't unfairly benefit from it politically. Last thing I want to do is point out this article in Axios, which dropped recently, exclusive. White House says the Biden agenda sparked $1 trillion in economic investment. Expect the White House to tout a new milestone on Monday, $1 trillion of private sector money put toward clean energy and manufacturing. Investments, officials say, are a result of Biden-era legislation. Trump is set to provide over an economy where parts of Biden's agenda will live on in the form of unfinished semiconductor factories or clean tech projects. Again, tying neatly into what we were just talking about. Trump might like the economic activity spurred by such projects, but he has threatened to roll back the laws passed under Biden that incentivized and funded them. A White House memo announcing the $1 trillion milestone, first seen by Axios, does not name Trump, but it hints at the uncertain fate of unspent funds allocated by Biden-era legislation, including the Inflation Reduction Act. The progress we've made represents only a fraction of the full impact of this agenda, White House Deputy Chief of Staff Natalie Quillen writes in the memo, quote, if future administrations continue to implement at the pace we have, people across the country will enjoy the benefits of safer water, cleaner air, faster internet, and smoother commutes. And again, to the extent that this happens at all, because Trump doesn't repeal the laws or it happens in spite of Trump's incompetence, he's going to try to take credit for it. We can't let that happen. We have to constantly push back on that because, unfortunately, facts don't speak for themselves. Records don't speak for themselves. And this is something that we liberals and progressives and people in the Democratic coalition have to understand. It's important to deliver, yes, and then it's important to thump your chest and to shout your accomplishments so it's seared into the minds of voters. And it'll be too easy for that to not happen. These investments in in industries of the future are ensuring the future is made in America by American workers, according to a statement to be released by President Biden. So, the last part, the huge sums of private sector money pouring into the economy and the popularity of the legislation's tax credits and more might make it less appealing to roll back at least some of Biden's agenda. Folks, we'll see what happens. But again, as a consequence, we're seeing these Fox News and CNBC hosts freak out over Donald Trump's threats to tariff the hell out of our top three trading partners, triggering a three-front simultaneous trade war. Again, hopefully that doesn't happen, but it's possible. And again, in contrast, because of the diligence and competence of the Biden administration, at least with respect to the domestic agenda and the hard work of mostly Democrats, but occasionally Republicans, people are benefiting. And in the long term, they will continue to benefit. And again, it's just important to make sure that we assign the credit accurately and rationally, which is with the Democrats and not the Republicans. Food for thought. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.